Welcome everybody to the annual Transit Accessibility Information Meeting. As most you know that have attended these meetings before, this is an annual event, basically a report card from Transit as far as talk about accessibility, as far as where we've been, where we're at, where we're going. If you want to type in any questions you might have, the city clerk will read those at the end of this presentation, and we will answer them as best we can. So again, welcome. It's hard to believe it's been a year already, but it's time certainly flies in these times. So we'll start off. Some of these might be very familiar as we go through this. You'll notice that we are compliant with everything that's accessibility involved as far as transit goes, and I'll be introducing some new items as we go along for the following year. So again, if you have any questions, please type them in, and we'll read them at the end of the presentation. So for those that don't know me, I am Mike Mosley, Manager of Transit for the City of Stratford. I manage the conventional system as well as the mobility service that the city provides. And I also have some involvement with the PC Connect, which is the county-run service that we introduced a couple years ago. Basically, those make up of two routes that run from Stratford, one to KW, one to London, one that's a listable to KW with all points in between, and there's a Perth A and Perth B, two county runs north of the city that come into town. So I do have some involvement of that as well. I will be introducing a new member to the group, not new to the city, but a new role that was developed in the last few months, and I'll make some introductions as far as that too as we go along. So like I said, the purpose of the meeting is this is an AODA regulation that we all agencies must at least once a year talk about accessibility, talk about new and improved, talk about where we're at now, and also discuss where we're going to in the future. So we're going to make a presentation on the accessibility. We'll also talk about some new funding that's accessibility based for the following year. And like I said, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So for those that don't know, the AODA, which stands for, it's just an acronym which stands for Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It requires, like I mentioned, an annual public meeting to discuss where transit is at as far as an accessibility. Transit services must be also addressed in the city's accessibility plan, which it is. And the public has opportunity to review and provide feedback on the plan for the transit service. You can find the accessibility plan on the city's website. As you can tell by the date, it's 2018 to 2022. So we're getting very close to updating the accessibility plan for the city. And like I said, the full plan is available on the city website, and it's under accessibility. So there are some requirements for conventional and specialized transit providers for those that provide a transit service to the public. And first off, which we've probably all seen before, depending on which service you use, we have the 40-foot conventional buses, which are on a fixed route. Which do kneel, which means the front of the bus just lowers a little bit closer to the ground, and a ramp's deployed for those that have mobility issues, whether maybe they're on a scooter, maybe they're in a wheelchair, or maybe they use a walker. That's offered as part of the general makeup of what a bus looks like now. All our buses have this option. And of course, the picture on the right is for those that use the mobility service. There is a front door with a couple steps for those with assistance from the driver can use the steps, or if they're have some mobility issues, again, with maybe they're in a wheelchair, maybe they're in a scooter, or even maybe they use a walker if they're more comfortable with the lift at the back. The operator of the bus will assist those using the lift in the back. So general requirements for conventional and specialized transit providers, we have to have an emergency preparedness and response plan. And I can just give you actually a latest example of how that happened is yesterday, the UPS on Griffith Road had a building evacuation due to a fuel leak in the building itself. So they had to evacuate. So there's a specific plan that if fire or police need a evac bus to house people while they deal with the situation, that's what we do. We get maybe about 4 or 5 calls maybe throughout the year at all times of the day if there's an issue at an apartment building and they need to evacuate the tenants that live there. We will send a bus, contact the command, which is either police or fire, and we will put them on the bus and usually sit there unless it's something that might be a little bit worse, and then we'll actually take them to another location if that's the case. So this just happened actually the other day, like I mentioned, at UPS. They had to evacuate the building. It was not a nice day outside, so they asked for a bus that is, of course, climate controlled, and we sat about a block away while they dealt with the situation until they could go back in. So that's for mobility bus. That's for conventional, the big bus. Like I said, we do probably 4 or 5 times a year if there's a situation that people need to be housed while the situation is taken care of by first responders. We go to that scene and we take direction from whoever's on command at the scene. Also, general requirements for fares and support persons. Basically, fares need to be parallel from each service. So whatever we charge to ride the conventional bus is the same to ride the mobility bus. Support persons can, of course, ride for free on both services. They just have to let us know. We give them a little ID card so that they can show that to the operator of the bus so that they can provide support to whoever they might be with. Some further general requirements for conventional transit is fares, like I just mentioned. Fares need to be the same across the board, whether it's specialty or it's regular conventional transit. Transit stops need to be accessible, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's a little bit more of a work in progress to get close to almost 300 stops to an accessible forms. Storage of mobility aids, conventional and specialized. We actually have storage for, let's say, walkers for the most part that we see the most. There is a storage area on both types of buses. And of course, I'll show you a little bit a picture of the courtesy and the priority seating. This has been around for a long time, especially if you've been on the conventional bus. You know, notice near the front, there's 2 stickers. There's a blue one and a black one, and they both have specific type of information as far as courtesy and priority seating. We'll talk about that as I show a couple slides down. Service disruptions, which does happen from time to time, but very much transit is, if it's a bad weather day, usually transit's usually the last one that is comes off the road. Although in my almost 8 years, we might have had to have stopped for a little bit, but we've never taken buses off the road. So only because it's tougher to do later in the day when we've provided service in the morning and the weather gradually got worse during the remainder of the day. If we got people to where they needed to go, whether it was school or work or whatever the case may be, we really work hard to make sure the buses stay on the road so that people can get back. So, but at this point, that hasn't happened in the 8 years that I've been looking after the transit department. There's been some pretty rough days and some rough evenings, but we get through it. Just maybe just a little bit late. And as far as those disruptions, we now have the bus media screens in the real-time app, so we can push out any type of announcement we want in a second's notice, as far as to inform customers either that are on the bus, either through a visual or audio announcement, and of course on the real-time app it'll come up as well. And these were the stickers that I was talking about that are on both sides of the bus near the front. So you have the priority seating, which is for persons with disabilities. Then you have the courtesy seating as well, which is if a passenger feels that, if someone's sitting in that seat and they might be in need of a seat themselves, that someone that comes on the bus, they can give up that spot. And this is a program that's on, and of course it's based on AODA, but every transit agency has this form of information material, maybe not be in the same form as this, but it's pretty much the same message all across the board. Of course, we do have some technical requirements for conventional transit. They seat up to 37 people, but certain parts of the day, the buses can get pretty packed. Especially around school time, or people going to work first thing in the morning, and then mid-afternoon when school's out, or people are coming from work, that the odd time that you might need to stand, there might not be a seat available. So on every bus, there's all kinds of grab bars and handholds, handrails, stanchions. They're all clearly marked yellow, at least for Stratford Transit anyway. Some other transit operations, they just might be in chrome or a different color, but ours are yellow so that they stand out so people can see them. One of the specs when we purchase buses, floors need to be a non-slip surface. And of course, in the Nova buses, there's mobility spaces. There's 2 on each side for those that are in a mobility device. It's just a matter of ours are kind of rear facing. So you just kind of back into them once you get on the bus. Of course, on the stanchions and the grab rails, there's stop requests. So if you can't get to the pull cords to ring the bell on either side of the bus, there are stop request buttons all the way down each side of the bus that are within reach if you were in a mobility device, that you can use that if you want to stop request. Of course, the middle picture there, I've spoken about this in previous meetings, but it's the new audiovisual stop announcements that we implemented a couple years ago. It also will display city messages or advertising as the slides that appear when you're on your trip. Of course, and I've already talked about lifting devices and ramps in the kneeling of bus, which is pictures 1 and 3, which are the aids that we use to transport. So now a little bit on the specialized service, which is the smaller bus. That's the one with the lift in the back. There are categories of eligibility. There is an application process. So basically the customer, there's a portion for them to fill out, and then there's a portion that either their doctor or a nurse practitioner or therapist or whatever they might be can fill out that little portion as well. And they submit it to the mobility office where we look over it and then accept it. We have yet, as of at this point in time, denied anyone as far as their access to a mobility bus. Some will use both, depending on the time of year and the weather. Some still will ride conventional when it's easy to do for them. The rest of the time they might use the mobility bus, or they might flip back and forth, depending on if they have to get maybe some groceries. It might be a little bit easier for the mobility bus to assist with carrying their groceries, because we do carry up to 3 bags. We will assist them, door to door. We will help them out with that kind of stuff. For specialized as well, there's the odd time someone might not be registered, but it's an emergency. It could be a visitor that's here that needs the service, or on compassionate grounds. I know this year alone we've probably done quite a few of those, that ones that for those individuals that weren't necessarily had an application on file, but it was either an emergency or compassionate grounds, and we just we looked after them the way we would look after everyone else. That does come up from time to time, and we do make exceptions for those. Fare parity I talked about before. That's the same rate for transit as it is for the specialized. The coordinated service is that's basically the other provider in town would be Easy Ride or One Care. A lot of times they will refer some of their customers to us if it's anything but a medical ride. So as well, with specialized, hours of service, hours have to run the same. They have to be parallel to what transit runs. They can run longer if they want, but they have to at least at a minimum run the same hours that the conventional transit does. For us bookings, we do up to 2 weeks in advance. So we always, especially tell new customers that, as soon as a doctor's appointment or you need to be somewhere at a special time, to call as soon as you can to make sure that there's a spot there for you. As always, it's always been first come, first serve as far as the mobility bus goes. Service delays, we don't quite have the technology that the conventional bus does, but we do have everyone's phone number on file. So that if we're late for whatever reason, we make sure we contact them. And of course, there's the companions or the worker or the support person or family member that can ride for free if that individual needs support from start to finish. So I've shown this slide a few times before. These are the newer bus shelters that we started about 3-4 years ago now. They're bigger in design. There are 5 by 10, and they're also solar powered with light at night. And the bench is a non-barrier bench. These are the styles that we've been going to. They do offer a 4 by 8 in the odd time because of what I've had to work with in certain locations. I have gone to, I think there's 2 4 by 8s in town. But for the most part, I like the 5 by 10. They're quite spacious. There's lots of room, and like I said, they're powered by solar battery. So and they last a good 2 or 3 years before I need to get batteries replaced. So that's going to continue to be the style as we go along. I'll talk about shelter projects here in a moment. But that's just kind of gives you a visual of what they look like. This particular one's in front of the local on Erie Street. So the project for 2023 for shelters, I've listed these as proposals. As I've mentioned before, and those that have heard me talk about shelters, we're getting to the point where we're in kind of a replacement mode at this point from the ones that have been out there for 25 to 30 years. The older ones, the older brown ones, some of them are not necessarily accessible, and they're the 4 by 8 size, which I just find a little small. So I'll just go through the list kind of quickly. This is kind of the thought process for next year's project. We're thinking about one at the Canadian Legion on Ontario Street. There's a popular bus stop on Vivian Line just off of Romeo. Another popular stop is Hibernian Foreman. And replacement, St. Vincent and Patterson, that's a very old shelter. And when I say replace, I mean, it's not just the shelter being replaced, but it's being the existing pad. And if there's a walkway that doesn't quite work, that will all be replaced with new concrete and made more accessible. Joe's Diner in Erie, that will be a new one, as that's another popular stop. The two bus stops in Coston, they're smaller ones, they're 4x8. They're very popular bus stops. So the plan is to replace those with the bigger and a bigger pad and with the 5x10 shelters. As you can see, the rest of them are replacements because they're all the 4x8s. And that's going to be Avonwood at Devon, the Kemp and Capelli stop. That's a very popular stop. The Arden Park on Romeo, the Walmart, a very popular stop that's going to be replaced as well. We have an old shelter at McCarthy and Greenwood, McCarthy at Deacon. Those are popular, and the Stratford General Hospital on West Gore is an older 4x8. So we're looking at having all these replaced with the bigger shelters and a bigger concrete pad and more accessible. You've probably a couple years ago, this goes with the media screens that I spoke of with the audio and visual announcements. This is the portion of the real-time app that you can see bus arrivals. This can be on your phone, can be on your computer, can be on a laptop or a tablet. You just need to plug in your stop and what route, and it'll give you what time the bus will be at your stop in real time. We found this very popular over the last couple of years. Now, a couple slides. You probably remembered me last year. I was talking about the media screen, which is at the front of the bus. This is the 24-inch screen that lists distance to the next stop. It'll list 5 stops. It'll also list, as you can see here at the bottom, any announcements we need to make, whether it's detour, construction, or delays. We can program that into the system and put that out in real time. So that bottom text that you see will also be on that real-time app, which is the slide before, if that's the route that you're looking to use. We've found this very helpful, and especially during the past season with construction, there was a lot going on. We found this very useful as far as letting the public know that there was going to be some delays because, of course, we travel the same roads as everyone else and have to deal with the same issues as traffic or construction or whatever the case may be. So this is the screen that we had from day one. It's a 24-inch screen at the front. Then I found out that we wanted to do something a little bit more to try to get the message out. So what was just completed in the last month and a bit, and anyone that's used transit now will see 2 additional media boards in each bus. So this is the front one. By the back door, we have 2 screens back to back. This screen is mainly for the mobility spaces, because as I mentioned, if you're in a mobility device and you back in to the space, you're actually facing backwards. So instead of trying to look around to see the 24-inch screen at the front of the bus, you can just look straight ahead, and this one will give you visual stop announcements, just like the front screen. And the screen behind that is the same 21-inch screen that you can see from the very back of the bus. Although the 24-inch screen up front wasn't too bad, it's only 24-inch, so we decided that we'd put another monitor from the back door facing the back so those could see the announcements and stop requests as well. So each bus has 3 screens now. And before I carry on, I'd like to introduce Gabby Rodriguez. She's not new to the city. She was in an HR role temporarily, but now she has taken on the role of accessibility, diversity, and inclusion, and she's the coordinator. Very busy job. Gabby and I will be probably doing lots from a transit perspective, but I'd like to introduce Gabby to the group. And she's going to talk about the next couple slides. And Gabby, just tell me when you're done with this slide and I'll change it for you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the introduction, Mike. So a future project that we may be working on is called Magnus Cards. Other municipalities have this in their transit, and hopefully we can have this in our municipality. But Magnus Cards is a free app that helps people who are neurodiverse or with autism gain the independence and confidence in using our transit services. So this is a customary app, and it provides a step-by-step guide on how to use our services in a positive reinforcement form. So next slide, Mike. So to provide an illustration of what this app does, it's an app, but it's customizable to the City of Stratford, and it gives you step-by-steps on how to ride the bus, how to transfer a bus, or how to access the bus with your mobility device. And it gives you the reinforcement of how it is to ride the bus. Many of us have the fear of the unknown. So this is a tool that provides comfort and confidence in accessing our transit services. So this is a hopeful tool we can use in making our transit services more accessible and more inclusive to everyone. And that is all on my end. So I'll pass it on to you, Mike. So thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Gabby. And looking forward to working with you on this. And just to add that this is one of my funded projects for next year, because there is a cost to this. For those that have heard me talk about ISIP before, that is funded the last 5 years of projects, whether it's shelters, whether it's buses, mobility, and conventional. I've put this as part of an application for next year that hopefully come around the springtime. Gabby and myself will start working on slides and make it a unique experience for Stratford Transit. So I'm really looking forward to this, and like I said, it's a funded project for next year. So like I mentioned, in some of these slides you've seen before, and that's only because there's been no new requirements for transit from an AODA perspective. We might do some more than what's required if you go from municipality to municipality. Some things, you know, I go back to bus stops and bus shelters and trying to circle back. Like I said, we almost have 300 of them. We have 61 shelters in total. And trying to get those in a better accessible format does take some time and does take some resources, of course, financially. That's why every year I try to get funding so that we can start, you know, continue to improve on the bus stops that we have out there. We continue to meet existing legislation. Like I said, we annual transit meetings, got to have at least one, which we do. Still on the books from the last year and a half. I'm still waiting for the one mobility replacement bus that was ordered, well, probably about a year and a half ago now, but due to all kinds of, I don't have to dwell on this, but we all know what supply chain and issues with parts and everything has been for the last couple years, and it continues. I'm hoping to have the new bus in by the end of the year or beginning of next. That's kind of the latest. But this one was ordered like almost 2 years ago. But yeah, for obvious reasons, things happen. Gabby and myself, we talked about the Magnus Card app introduction. We're going to look at that next year. And like I said, I mentioned about the additional accessible bus shelters. And that's the new construction and replacing and updating the old infrastructure that we have out there. From the last public meeting, and this is always kind of a common topic, which aligns with the projects that we do every year. Basically, the comments have always been, and were last year, we need more accessible bus shelters and need to replace the aging smaller shelters, which is what we're going to be looking at next year. And that is it for my presentation. And if there's any questions, I will do my best to answer those.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike, for the wonderful and very informative presentation. There are a number of questions and comments in the Q&A. So with that, I'm just going to start going through them one by one. So the first one is a comment from Ken Wood, and it says, live with Tatiana and Mike with an exclamation mark. And Ken, I really appreciate this energy. So moving to the first question from Ken Wood. The question is, will there be a Citizens Transit Advisory Committee going forward with the new council?
Good question, Ken. I think you're referring to like the ad hoc committee that we had. When did that disband? Probably 2 years ago. It's so hard to keep track, but I know that has been mentioned with the new council coming in. I've kind of heard bits and pieces that that they have an appetite to start an ad hoc again, and if that's the case, certainly we will go with whatever is recommended from council and go from there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. So the second question is from Ken Wood, and it's how many were on this online Zoom event? And looking at the screen, I see a total of 9 people in attendance at this time. So moving to the next question from Ken Wood, why is City Hall still doing online meetings when restrictions have been eased off province and nationwide? I would suggest that online only meetings are contrary to the principles of accessibility. So Mike, I don't know if you want to take a shot at this or if you'd like me to give some information.
I mean, I can't speak to the issue at City Hall because I know it's the elevator that we're still waiting for repairs on. I, for one, can't wait to get back to. I'm a little bit older, and this type of technology I've kind of fumbled my way through in the last couple of years, so I'm looking forward to it as well. But I know there's especially at City Hall, there's some roadblocks as far as getting that back to a sense of normal. I don't know, Tatiana, whether you can speak more to that.
So basically that was going to be the information I was going to give, that meetings continued to be held electronically due to a flooding incident at City Hall, which damaged our elevator. And I do know that once more information is available and we are able to return to in-person meetings, that will be communicated on our website and social media channels. But thanks for the question. So moving to question number 4 from Ken. The question is, why is regular transit still so unreliable? It seems that especially at 3:44 p.m. weekdays, that buses are doing pickups going out of the downtown core, and that's a personal experience.
Okay, good question. And that has a lot to do with school dismissal at 3 o'clock. So the issue is, compared to the morning when we transport a lot of kids, in the morning they have basically about an hour and a bit to get to school because we do 2 runs. The end of the day at 3 o'clock, we have 350 students all being dismissed at the same time and trying to get on whatever bus might be moving in the area. Of course, trying to load that many and get them to where they want to go does take time. So usually you'll find late in the afternoon, like starting at 3 o'clock when we pick the kids up, it's basically adding an additional 350 riders into the system, and it takes time. And a lot of them are going to the terminal waiting for a connection, and then you've got a lot of students trying to get on the line buses as well. Also with the 2 line buses, the McCarthy and the Huron that go past the high schools, a lot of the students like to use that bus too, because they don't want to necessarily go right downtown. They might be on the route of the McCarthy or the Huron. it's a lot of people in a very short period of time trying to get on transit. And we've even put an additional school special on to try to lessen the loads a little bit. It's just a matter of, like I said, a lot of people concentrated in a very short period of time, and they're all looking for transit at the same time. Then after that, it's just a matter of trying to get caught up. Sometimes they might need to drop a trip at 5 o'clock if they're too far behind. Sometimes, depending on the day, you know, things start to calm down a little bit at 5 o'clock. We can just start getting caught up just by the nature of we're not picking up that many people. But Ken, that's basically the reason why mid-afternoon, there's a lot going on and a lot of people trying to get on transit all at the same time.
Thanks, Mike. So the next question is from Ken Wood, and it is, why should schools be using regular transit? Could you not schedule specials like you do for industry to match student needs? Also, why isn't education system paying for this?
Okay, well, the last part, I believe based on where, I know there's certain criteria for the board to buy student bus passes. They're at that's the grade 7 and 8s. The board doesn't, from my knowledge up to this point, won't purchase bus passes for either St. Mike's, like for the high schools. They have to buy their own. But I know for the 7 and 8s, they do provide, the board will provide bus passes for those if you live within a certain amount. I think it's 1.2 or 1.4 kilometers away from the school. That does change from time to time. School specials, from what I've been told, have been happening for decades. I believe even 30, 40 years ago, school specials that city transit looked after school transportation in the city. The only yellow school buses you would see would be maybe the specialized bus in town, but basically all the yellow school buses, which is for student, they pick up all around the county and come and feed either Central, Stratford District, or St. Mike's. As far as, you know, they do subsidize some of the students at Central. It's probably 150, maybe 200 passes a month, I think, at last count anyway. But for as far as I know, transportation in town has always been by transit for the longest time. I don't know if that answered all your questions on that one.
That's okay. I think I did a pretty good job. If not, there's still time to submit questions into the Q&A. So the next one isn't a question, it is a comment, and it says, kudos for new solar powered lighted shelter, smart move. And that's also from Kenwood.
Okay.
So our next question is from Bonnie Henderson, and it says, what are we doing with the old bus terminals?
The old bus terminals.
I'm wondering if that means like the old bus shelters that we're replacing, although I could be wrong. Shelters we are removing, clarification.
Oh, shelters, okay. The old ones, the ones that we've dismantled already, we have about 3 or 4 of them. I have them stored just in case I need parts for the ones that are still out there, because there'll still be probably there's at least 30 out there of the old ones. It'll probably take about 3 to 5 years to get those replaced. In the meantime, I'll probably stockpile them just for parts, as we'll probably still need to replace parts as time goes on. Long term, I'm not quite sure what we would do with all those parts. Some of those parts, like the roofs, aren't worth saving. The steel extrusions and the glass I'll keep because that glass fits even the 5x10. All the glass I will store. I have lots of extra glass because sometimes glass gets broken. But as far as the steel extrusion parts, I'll have to think outside the box to see if anything we could do with those. I mean, they could still be built or still be used to some degree. Some of that parts they even make a 5x10, but some of those pieces are fairly old, and I'm not sure if they could be refurbished. Unless we came up with somehow to use them, they'd probably just be sold for scrap.
Thanks, Mike. So the next question is from Ken Wood, and it is, what are plans for snow removal at bus stops this winter? I still experience some routes / drivers dropping people off in the middle of the intersections as roads get plowed by access to stop shelters often have high piled snow.
Okay, very good question, and I get this all the time. Actually, I've even had a couple calls about snow removal. So snow removal, we have 2 contractors that we hire. One's for the terminal, because that's a big piece of real estate and a lots of area where people walk. The second contractor does the almost 300 bus shelters. Where I'm in contact with that contractor all the time because we watch the weather. There is a policy about snow removal, and it pretty much mirrors the Public Works policy about a certain amount of snow. When it gets to that amount, then we have 48 hours to try to get it cleared up. Now, the issue on the main roads isn't so bad because snow removal or the city plows focus on the main arteries first. So we can usually get those cleared up pretty quick. Sometimes we run into an issue deep into the residential areas that, depending how bad it is, we have to balance out the fact that it would be kind of silly to clear bus shelters before the street gets plowed, because then I have to go back and take out what the plow put in. So we usually try to time it and wait because the city does an excellent job with the street plows. They usually get it done within 24 to 48 hours too. So once I get that information from Public Works, then I will send my crew out that night after I know the plows gone through, instead of having to do it twice. So that's usually how it works. We watch the weather a lot. We're going to be getting some snow tonight, from what I've heard, up to 10 centimeters. So, but it's supposed to warm up a little bit tomorrow too. So some of that will melt, but we'll be seeing what the morning brings. But that's how we do snow removal in the city. We have 2 contractors. One does the terminal, because that's a fairly big space. And then the other contractor, depending how much snow, will try to get it all done in one night. If not, sometimes it'll take 2 nights, depending on how much snow's falling.
Thanks, Mike. So the next couple items are actually comments. So the one is from Bonnie Henderson. It says, great idea about the 2 screens. And then the next one is from Kenwood. It says, good move for specialized position screens for those in mobility devices, over and above requirements. Well done.
Thank you.
So then there's another question from Kenwood, and it says, regarding those with developmental or mental health issues, I've always found virtually every single driver is poised and helpful towards such riders. Often they're greeted by name. Mike, your drivers are great people. And that was a comment.
Well, thank you. And being in a small community, we always have that opportunity to get to know pretty much everybody. And it's I get lots of compliments from the drivers all the time that's very well appreciated, and I'll make sure I pass that along. Thank you, Ken.
So the next one from Kenwood is a comment. It says 61 shelters is good, but we do need more, especially in our climate.
And I don't disagree with you. We're almost getting to the point where I'm starting to run out of real estate to put them, unless I start putting them on private property, which I've done that in a couple cases. But then you have to get into legal requirements, people have to sign contracts because it's not city property. Unless I start moving bus stops, which I could do in some cases. Some cases that some of the very popular bus stops are just, a shelter wouldn't work there necessarily because of the location. So we Nathaniel, myself, Nathaniel's my supervisor, We're always kind of looking at, where can a new shelter go, or can we put one here, or you know what, this is a popular bus stop, where could we put a shelter? And we try to think outside of the box, but sometimes unless you move a shelter or move a bus stop, sometimes there's just not a lot of options. And I always told people before my tenure ends here, I would like to see at least 65 to 70% bus shelters everywhere.
That is a great goal, Mike.
It takes time, takes resources, right? So
Certainly does. So our next question is from Ken Wood, and it is, given our universal experiences with the global supply chain, can Stratford Transit prioritize Ontario or at least Canadian suppliers for everything we need?
Good question, Ken. Actually, and we've been thinking about this over the last 16 months when it started to become a real issue. I'm all about Canadian content. There's actually rules for Canadian content, especially for buses, mobility buses, as far as how much Canadian product is in what we buy. The trouble is that as much as I like to shop local, which is what I do, I'm very Stratford type of, if there's something here, I'm going to buy it here. The trouble is, and like you said, it's globally. So buying from Canadian or buying from US or buying in Stratford, depending on what you're looking for, has had some challenges in trying to get supply of anything from anywhere. It's if it's tires or it's a part for Nova, we purposely store old retired buses at the public works yard. I don't know if anyone's seen that. And we keep them there, and we salvage any usable part off that bus, which we've always done. That's not a pandemic or supply chain issue. We've always done that, whether it's an HVAC system, whether it's stanchions, whether it's a driver's seat, whether it's whatever. We park them there for that reason, and they could stay there for a couple of years because we take those parts off for Nova buses, and it's become really prominent now because of supply chain issues. There was even a while there we couldn't get tires for buses. It's been really tough, but that's just one of the things we do is we reuse parts. Parts on an old bus that we retired that still might be good. We'll go over my technicians will go over there, climb underneath the bus and take stuff out and bring it back and install it. And it saves time, saves a lot of money, especially now, because as we know, everything's tripled in price pretty much. It's been a challenge too. I'm all about buying local, but that's even been very tough. I'm hoping that will change over, they're saying 2024, 2025, from what the industry is kind of saying, that we should kind of get back to normal, but that's speculation and up for debate. But you know what, Ken, I'm all about sourcing things locally. It's just even that's been tough to do lately.
Thanks for the information. So the next item is a suggestion from Ken, and it reads, I note a great technology advance with 3D printers. There are now metal 3D printers that can print pretty much any part required in a day or less, as opposed to waiting months or more. And Ken has kindly provided us with a link.
Oh, excellent. I like to see that link. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So the next question is from Ken, and it reads, Mike, can you provide a brief update on where we are at with electrification of buses? And also, will there be any possibility of smaller buses for winding residential streets and bigger buses on express routes, east and west and northeast to northwest?
Okay, I'll tackle the electrification first. So I've actually hired a consultant to do a feasibility study. So, and that's going to be GHG gas reductions. That's going to be noise reduction. It's going to be a fulsome report. They started about a month ago. I've been working with them in hopes to have a report to council in 6 months. And this study is going to tell us, what we need for infrastructure, what we're going to need for power, what we're going to need for charging stations at the facility, the garage. Are we going to need overhead charging systems in a layover point? Will that be at the terminal? Will it be somewhere else en route? They're also going to suggest bus size and what type of bus. They're going to talk about cost, because if anyone's heard before, my present garage facility just fits the 15 buses. There is no more room, but I've also applied for funding to expand a little bit over the next couple of years, because you've got battery storage compartment charging systems, you have the charging systems itself. They're just, from what I've seen by touring TTC and Brampton, sorry, these are pretty big units as far as charging infrastructure goes. So right off the bat, I know I'm going to need to expand the facility that I'm in now for bus storage. So they're going to tell us all that, come the springtime. I hope to have a fulsome report to council that's going to outline everything that the city needs to do as far as to make electrification feasible, the cost savings over time. They're going to give us all that report, and then from that, then we'll be making some recommendations. Council, I'm sure, will be making some recommendations too. But I can't tell you, it's not a cheap project. We'll have stakeholders like Festival Hydro for power infrastructure. If we got enough power going to the terminal, if we're going to do overhead, if we got enough power coming to the garage for charging stations. So there's a lot of moving pieces with this, but it's we've got the ball rolling. So I'll be working with a consultant over the next few months, and hope to have something in front of council by come springtime. Then from there, we will make some decisions. Now, I can tell you in the meantime, I'm pretty much done buying diesel buses, fossil fuel, purely. My next 2 orders, which I've already applied for, which I should hear something maybe early next year or by springtime, is I'm going to move to hybrid buses. And that's for a couple reasons. One, it gets the technicians a little bit involved in working with a battery, not a full battery, but battery with still a little diesel engine. And it's going to get, because they do drive differently, it'll give the operators a chance to get familiar with it. So, and we're well on our way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by going hybrid. So that I hope to see in the next year and a half. Hopefully, I wish I could put a timeline on the electrification. That's, of course, is a project over time. But at least come the spring, we'll have an idea of what we're up against and what we need to do to make this happen, which I'm all about reducing GHG gases. So, and I think, sorry, I got a little rambly there. Ken mentioned about smaller buses. I do believe.
Yes, do you want me to reread that portion?
Yeah, just the bottom part. I think it was about smaller buses, especially through residential areas, I think.
Yeah, so any possibility of smaller buses for winding residential streets and bigger buses on express routes.
Okay, and a question that's it's been always it always comes up. Why not smaller buses? So as I mentioned about things like morning rush hour and afternoon rush hour with the kids, students, and people going to work, that's where we will with smaller buses we'll run into an issue just as far as capacity. Others have mentioned, well, can you maybe just have the bigger buses on the road for those times and then go back to the smaller ones? Logistically, tough to do. I don't have any room to store any additional buses, which is one problem. Second is resources and making those switches, several times during the day. So I kind of, you know what, and I do get it. And maybe the feasibility study will say, you know, you can maybe get by with 35 footers. Although at this point in time, with the amount of volumes that we have at certain parts of the day, the 40 footers aren't enough. I mean, we're packing them in like crazy for certain parts of the day. And it's just logistically. But in my mind, a 40-foot electric bus, you won't even hear it going down the street. And the amount of fuel it saves, or well, no fuel. It's one of those things. I was kind of related to, you know, there's, when you're going into Toronto on the 401 at 2 in the morning, there's 6 lanes going into Toronto, but you're the only one out there, and you're saying, well, why are there so many lanes? There's no one using it. Well, wait a couple hours and those 6 lanes will be packed. That's kind of how, you know, it's there if you need it. That's kind of my thought, but I understand the question.
Thanks, Mike. So our next question is from Matthew Maynard, and it is there any improvements for the Saturday and Sunday on-demand service? Communication between drivers to improve service for on-demand riders. See buses pass them for another rider.
Okay, well, not really an accessibility question, but I'll answer this quickly. So the system is designed to do the shortest trips based on destinations where you're going. So you might see 3 buses around Walmart, and they all might be picking up at Walmart, but it's where they're going to is the key based on the system, because it keeps updating every millisecond as calls come in. So 3 buses going to Walmart to pick up 3 people might look silly, but it's based on the call after that where they're getting dropped off. So that's kind of the Coles Notes version. It's very electronic. There is a lot of communication between drivers, because they might, we try not to pass anyone. We might be going to, I don't know, the mall shelter, and you know, we see someone standing at the Krabby Joe's one. We'll grab them if we're passing them, and we'll radio to all the drivers that, hey, you know what, I made a pickup at Krabby Joe's, you can take it off your list. We try not to pass anyone. So there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of communication between the drivers on Saturday and Sundays than there are during the week. But that's kind of a Coles Note version of how it works. It's based on the calls that are logged electronically based on GPS location of the bus. The GPS location is through the tablet that they have. So you might see buses kind of running around everywhere. But in actual fact, and I'll throw you this little tidbit too. Our fixed route service, so the 6 a.m. to 10 runs about just over 2,400 kilometers in a day. Our weekend on demand runs about 1,100 kilometers a day. So the buses only move when there's a purpose to go. So just the amount of fuel we're saving, that what I used to pay 92 cents is now a buck 60, buck 70 for diesel. The amount of savings for buses only moving and not running around empty all the time, like on a fixed route, let's say, is substantial. So a lot of working pieces with on demand, but I won't dwell too much on it. But that's kind of how it works. It's all projected where the calls are, and that's why you might see a bunch of buses in one area, then they kind of spread out. It all depends where they're going and where their next call is. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Mike. I definitely learned something new with that answer, so I appreciate you responding. So the last item is just a comment, and it's from Kenwood, and it says, "Thank you so much for a great meeting. Love your responses. You seem to be on the right track. Much appreciated."
Thank you, Ken.
So that is it for the questions currently. Perhaps we can just give it another minute. If there are any other questions or comments from our attendees, we'd be happy to answer them, and then we'll turn it back over to Mike just to close out the meeting. So we have another comment from Bonnie Henderson. It says, thanks, great meeting. I have another at 7. Thanks again.
Thank you, Bonnie.
So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to you, Mike, just to close the session.
Okay, all right, and I appreciate everyone's questions. It's I can talk about transit forever. I've been doing it for a very long time, and staff try their best, right? We don't always sometimes get where we want to, but it's always a work in progress. So, but I appreciate everyone's comments, and I do commend staff for the job they do, and deal with some tough days, right? So, yeah, but it's kind of the nature of globally of what's going on now. But I appreciate everyone's comments, and that's great. So, if you got, I'm always approachable. You can email me. I'll email you back. Might not be right away, but within at least a day, I try to get back to people. If you get any comments about transit or accessibility, or you just want to chat about whatever, there's my email address there. Also, Gabby, as she starts sinking her teeth into all the files that she's going to start to deal with, I put her email on there as well. And basically, I think that's pretty much it for me. I wish everyone a great evening, and let's continue to stay healthy. All right. Okay. Good night, everybody.